I handed another can of food to Eggskin, thinking idle thoughts about skin and scale colour. Neither of us were what I considered kindergartner crayon colours, though I was somewhere in the white, brown, pink area, while they were a yellow, green, white. Someday I'd ask them if they knew their scales were the colour of human boogers. No, I wouldn't. Really, I was thinking about that to avoid reading the labels of the food, since most of them had my alien crewmates in mind, and looked profoundly unappealing to me. This stack was mostly bug paste. Some cans were shelled and some unshelled. Flavoured with the highest quality algae. Bleh. That's the last of them, I said happily, handing it over. Eggskin placed it on the shelf and looked thoughtfully down at the counter, still strewn with shelf-stable food. Let's do the seed paste next. Leave the herb stalks out. I want to use them sooner than the rest. Following their pointing claw, I located the jars of peanut butter adjacent food, and the narrow boxes that I thought were spaghetti. Got it. I shoved the boxes aside and started passing the jars to Eggskin for placement. Reorganizing the shelves was a lot of work. I could see why they'd asked for assistance. At the very least, it would have gotten boring after a while. Eggskin asked, "So, what was the captain grumbling about just now?" I thought back to when Eggskin had recruited my help from outside the cockpit. I'd only been there to bring Weo the water bottle she left in the lounge, but it had been long enough to pick up the gist of the conversation. All the ships in this area have extra information on their IDs, and they keep popping up as images overlaying the map, making it hard to see where everything is. Eggskin turned with the speed of a striking snake. What area? Where are we going? I knew I should have checked the schedule. I didn't catch the name, I said, but Eggskin was already racing for the door. Put away the jars, please. I'll get the rest later. I paused for a moment, then hurried to put all the seed paste jars next to the cans of bug paste, labels forward and in neat rows. Then I ran after Eggskin. When I arrived at the cockpit, I found our ship's cook/medic with a hand on Weo's chair, pointing something out to the captain. Captain Sunlight sat in the co-pilot's seat, frowning at the screen. Many colours reflected off her bright yellow scales, glowing from the mismatch of light that was normally a dark starfield. If we make that much of a detour, we won't be able to make the delivery on time. We'll just have to go dark on communications until we get there. Eggskin made a concerned noise as Weo tapped several buttons with her tentacles. The room was suddenly darker, as all the company logos and custom images blinked out of sight. The screen now held the usual blackness of space, speckled with stars. One close enough to be called a sun, and a variety of ships mostly heading to or from a distant space station, shaped like a tube. There were also far more asteroids hanging around than I was entirely comfortable with. But before I could ask about that, the music started. I think it was music. What is that? I asked at the jumble of sounds. It sounded like several radio stations at once, some playing recognizable instruments, some talking, and others making what sounded like rude noises. In a tone of defeat, Eggskin said, "The ads and taunts can detect visual sensors. Some ships target outsiders in exactly our position. No time or money to buy a blocker." Weo made a rude sound of her own and turned the volume down. Captain Sunlight was still frowning. "I don't want to speak ill of anyone else's way of life, but this is terrible." Eggskin gripped both chairs, eyes trained on the screen. "It's one of many reasons why I left. You'll want to keep that big ship between us and the station for as long as you can." They pointed briefly. "Or else we'll have a core in our tail wanting to fine us for flying blind." "Terrible," the captain repeated. But she instructed Weo to do as they said, while aiming for one specific asteroid that hadn't come on screen yet. This seemed like a good time to ask, why are there so many asteroids this close to the station? Captain Sunlight flicked a glance at me, possibly only now noticing I was there in the doorway. Eggskin answered without turning. "It was meant to be a tourist attraction, but the company got bought out and the project abandoned. Now half of the gravity engines are failing, and reputable businesses are leaving the area." Weo said, "It still looks awfully busy." That would be the disreputable sorts. If you see a triangle where the stars disappear for a moment, fly at max speed in the other direction. Never mind the delivery time. Captain Sunlight turned her frown on Eggskin. Is that extreme of a danger? The hands on both chairs tightened. Yes. I studied the screen for any sign of disappearing stars. Black ships in the blackness of space were uncommon back in familiar territory, for the simple reason that they risked having someone crash into them and atomize both ships. But it sounded like someone here considered that a risk worth taking, so they could sneak up on others. I didn't ask what they did when they succeeded. We spent a tense few minutes flying in silence, with no sign of invisible ships and only a few pop-ups. Apparently, even flying blind couldn't block all of them out. At least these were mostly informational things on the asteroids themselves, defunct notifications about events and attractions that had never been finalized. One ship that looked cobbled together from spare parts had a blank panel above the thrusters that drew my eyes with how bright white it was. Eggskin stared at it intently. This could be nothing, they said, but it could be important. Use a tight beam scan for that panel. Weo did. As if the ship was just waiting for someone to look, it accelerated away and produced an image that glowed on our screen after it was long gone. The stylized pair of shapes were vaguely familiar. While Eggskin made a disappointed grumble, I asked, What is that? I've seen that symbol on the back of a racing ship. I believe, said Captain Sunlight, it is an insult. A view of the bottoms of the pilot's feet as they swim or fly away from you. Oh, I said. Huh. I guess it's like mooning someone, or an eat my dust bumper sticker. Before anyone could ask what human nonsense I was talking about, Weo spotted the meeting location. This one, right? She asked the captain. The mid-sized flat one? Captain Sunlight consulted a smaller screen. That is where they said to meet, but they also said they would be here before us, ready to rush off as soon as they got our delivery. Weo and Captain Sunlight inspected the surrounding area for other ships, which all seemed to have left. I kept watching the stars, sparing a glance for Eggskin, who looked more intense than ever. Scan the landing area, they said suddenly. The message that popped up this time was a simple text one, in a language I didn't recognize, but Eggskin did. Thought so. Send a type beam message back to open the Dropbox. This message. They rattled off a string of numbers that Weo dutifully copied down and sent. I saw the captain also copy it onto our notepad with an expression that suggested she had some questions for Eggskin later. Lo and behold, the flat part of the asteroid rolled back into an empty space that could have fit a ship larger than ours. The light of the distant sun showed it to be empty. Captain Sunlight sat back, exasperated. Where did they go? Weo said, There's a ship over there. Is that them? She turned our view to show a speedy little junker careening between the asteroids toward us. I don't think so, the captain said, unless they had to use a different ship. A patch of stars behind it winked out. I pointed. Invisible ship! Before Weo could hit the thrusters, Eggskin commanded, Get in the Dropbox! Weo threw a glance at Captain Sunlight, who nodded. Weo sent our little courier ship diving into the secret hidey hole, folding the solar sails and transmitting the other message Eggskin gave her to close the hatch. It was very dark inside that Dropbox. I thought briefly about the rest of the crew, who had no idea how much danger they were in. I didn't even know how much danger we were in, but I suspected it was a lot. Eggskin said, We should be safe after a few minutes. Given their trajectory, they were chasing that other ship. Even if they saw us, they'll be busy. Weo asked, These aren't the people who will find us, are they? No, Eggskin said firmly. The Corps will find you because they're what passes for a police force out here. Spherical ships like a planet's core. That, they said, pointing emphatically, was a Lancer. They will dismantle your ship, sell it for scrap, and sell you to a work camp. No, the Corps won't stop them. Yes, it's terrible. The captain nodded. One of the many reasons why you left. Yes. Well, we very much appreciate your expertise today. I'm just glad I realized where we are, Eskin said. I'll make a point of checking the schedule more regularly. And I will make a point of not accepting deliveries for this part of space, no matter how much they pay, the captain said wearily. We sat there a little while longer until Eskin said it was safe to open the hatch. All the stars were in place as we ventured out. Nothing moved, not even any drifting bits of dismantled ship. Good news. But also bad news, since we still didn't know where our client was. I will be extremely disappointed if all this risk was for nothing, Captain Sunlight said. Eskin, are there likely to be other drop boxes nearby that they could have hidden in? Eskin let out a breath. If there are, I won't know the codes for them. The captain made another note to herself and told Weo to search the area for other likely asteroids. I did my part by continuing to watch the stars, just in case. Weo said, most of these have a flat enough area to land on. Eskin put in, by design. Should I turn the communications back on to look for markers? Weo asked. There were no other ships over here to jam our screen. Eskin muttered, optimistic. Captain Sunlight said, do it. The drifting space rocks were suddenly festooned with logos. It wasn't as bad as before, but it wasn't great. They were all old and glitchy. Weo turned the volume up slightly, just enough to hear that any audio messages had dissolved into static. If anybody spots something promising, sing out. We all watched the screen as Weo slowly toured the area. A couple of asteroids had newer pop-ups, but these were clearly graffiti. Messages about how somebody was the envy of this half of the galaxy, or how whoever was reading the message should go stick their tail in a thruster. What species made most of this? Weo asked. The original owners were Frillians, said Eskin, though that graffiti clearly wasn't. And what species is our client? Weo asked the captain. Or is it a mixed ship? Captain Sunlight glanced down at her notes, then up at me. Human. Oh, no pressure. I haven't seen anything yet that looks particularly humanish, I said, but I'll look. I gave up on the stars for now and stared at the asteroids. Are those two just extra flat, or do they have panels like that other one ship did? Weo dutifully moved closer and scanned the two that I pointed out. One was a political slogan about something Waterwall related from several years ago. The other one was music. The volume was still quiet, but I recognized it. As Weo turned up the sound of synthetic drum beats, I grinned at the old Earth anthem. This asteroid was equipped with a rickroll. That's a human thing, I said. Check that one. Weo took us closer, then she sent a short-range communication ping, the equivalent of knocking on the door. And lo and behold, something pinged back and the door opened. A ship floated out that was sleek and aerodynamic, and painted in a camouflage pattern that did absolutely nothing to disguise it against the rock. I burst out laughing as Captain Sunlight held them to confirm that they were indeed the people we'd come to meet. I tried to laugh quietly. With the drop box closed again, there was space for both small ships to land side by side. Theirs even had an extendable airlock that matched up with ours, saving everyone the inconvenience of getting into exosuits and doing the handoff in whatever atmosphere still clung in the artificial gravity. I got to do the honours, with Captain Sunlight at hand close behind. I suspect she would have preferred to do it herself, but her little lizardly arms weren't up to carrying a box this size, and there wasn't space in the airlock for a hover sled. Simpler to just let the tall human do it. The airlock opened to show a guy who looked malnourished, stressed, and very relieved to see me. So glad you found us, he said in an unfamiliar accent, grabbing the payment tablet before I could offer it. It's just one thing after another these days. I bet, I said. Have you considered leaving? I have it on good authority that life is terrible around here. He handed the tablet back. Thought about it. Don't know what we do for a living. I gave him the box, which, according to the manifest, included fresh chicken eggs, kosher salt, and a selection of media from Earth. Have you considered a career as a courier? He smiled. I'll mention it to the crew. As he stepped back onto his own ship, I called, "Feel free to follow us out. We probably won't get caught by anybody horrible on the way." I heard a chuckle as the door closed. Once the airlocks were sorted away and everybody was back in position, Weo took us up from the asteroid and back towards civilized space. I watched from the doorway while Exkin kept an eye out for dangers. We made it out of the asteroid zone safely. And so did the other ship, following close behind us.